So first, I'd like to welcome you, Gabriela. Thank you so much for being here with us. Gabriela is a graphic designer. Formerly, she come from Brazil, and then she worked in New York from Sagmeister Walsh and then Walsh. And now she's working on Google and taking care of Google YouTube Music. That's it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming here, and please start.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I prepare, as Roberto said, I prepared this presentation. I'll try to keep it super short so we can chat after. But yeah, oops, let's see here. Yeah, there you go. So my name is Gabriela Namie and I'm from São Paulo. And I'm currently an art director at Google, to be more specific, YouTube Music. But I actually, now I live in Brooklyn, but I never thought of living in São Paulo. That's where I'm from. And that's one of the reasons that made me start Studio Barca when I was there. So after graduating, I worked in different places, mostly with branding and illustration. So I worked for a branding agency. I worked for a trend research office. I worked in small studios, and I started freelancing, and that just evolved into Studio Barca, and I co-founded that with a friend of mine from college, Jim, and Barca still exists under his leadership. But I was suddenly called to work in New York for Sagmeister Walsh, and I thought that was just a cool opportunity, that I would just stay in New York for a little bit and then come back to my life. But then some years had passed, and I was here, and I actually liked Brooklyn, and I wanted to stay. So after working for a few years at Sagmeister Walsh, I moved to the polar opposite experience of a studio and went to tech, work for Google since January. So just a brief introduction here. But a little bit, to get a little bit more personal here, my family, everyone is Japanese in my family, but we have been in Brazil for over 3-4 generations. So it was, and this is a fun fact, Brazil has the largest Japanese community outside Japan. So here in the left, you see, that's my great grandmother. And on the right, you see my mom's side of the family. So both my mom's side and my dad's side of the family went to Brazil 4 generations ago to work in coffee farms. And how did we go from coffee farms to design? Because another fun fact, me and my mom, we kind of find out about design together. So not together, but at the same time. So how do we go from coffee farms to design? I guess I want to show you 3 moments that really impacted how I think about design. And the first one was finding out that design existed. So I'm not sure about you, but I have a guess here that everyone here had a similar childhood interest toward creative stuff and drawing and doing creative things. So here you see some pictures of me just, drawing in kindergarten, or just doing all kind of small creative projects as a kid. In the middle, I was more of a teenager trying to make a stop motion video. And in the right, that's my mom. So my mom was, she studied literature, and she was a Portuguese teacher. I guess like here, that would be an English teacher. But when I was around 7, I asked her what was the most creative profession I could ever have. And she said Portuguese teacher. And I found that really amazing, because I could write and just practice that creative part of my brain. So I was really devoting a lot of time into that subject and just writing stories and creating characters in my head. But over time, my mom started taking jewelry lessons and just discovered drawing. And through that world, she discovered that design existed. So when I was around 12, I asked her again, like, what do I have to do to design book covers? And she said, you should, probably be a graphic designer. And I was really amazed that this even existed, that you could get paid to do something that I found so fun. But in the end, I never designed a book cover. So that was just, just how I found out about it. And the second moment was through my teenage years. My brother always played in bands, and he still does play in bands. So I really wanted to be as cool as he was, because he's the older brother. So I wanted to play and listen to the same genres he was listening to. So I was really bad at playing any musical instruments. But I was still drawn by the music. I was still drawn by the cool factor of it. So growing up, listening to punk rock bands, or here you see Buzzcocks, or this is a feminist band, Bikini Kill. That introduced me to a whole new world that was way beyond the music itself. And that's kind of obvious to me now, because when you think about genres, musical genres always are born connected to political ideas and very strong ideas. There are very few musical genres that are born out of nothing, like mostly commercial genres. But when you think of all those, there were pretty interesting ideas behind that. So I was really excited about all that, and that introduced me to probably my whole political perspective that I still hold until nowadays, or literature that I would never read the authors I found out at that time if it wasn't through music. And at that time, internet was really slow. I think Roberto probably knows about that as well. Anyone who's older, any website would take 2 to 3 minutes to load. So, but I would go into forums, punk rock forums and websites and blogs, and there was like such an interesting community online. People from all over the world that I would, get fed by all that information and all that culture, would get really excited about it. And that, through my teenage years, also influenced my design perspective. Not only me as a human, just finding out about political ideas, literature, everything else, but there were like that made me want to get feedback from those people. So I would illustrate and post it online and get feedback on like social networks of that time, and that was really interesting to me. And the third moment, I was already in college. So coming from São Paulo, São Paulo is a very car-centric city, and nowadays we do have cycling paths, but at that time there were no cycling paths, and the idea of biking was kind of crazy. But I was young, and I was just, the bus in front of my house was really slow. So in order to get to college and not have to wait so much for the bus, I started biking. So something that started as a hobby also introduced me to a whole new world that influenced myself, and of course design, something that I do so much, because that was just a hobby, but I met a lot of people in that through biking that had very interesting ideas. So the first thing, when you see all those cool buildings, I was born in São Paulo, but I had never experienced the city this close. So I was first looking at all the architecture and all the local references that I never paid attention. It's like what Brazilians did with modernism, adding this curve to modernism, everything that still influenced my work so much, and still as a visual reference, is really rich for me. But more than that, I was introduced to new ideas. So in the right you see Jane Jacobs. So Jane Jacobs is basically, she wasn't an architect, she wasn't an urbanist, she was just a journalist who was paying attention to the city and observing how the city worked. And that really blew my mind. That really blew my mind, that all her ideas, and she represents nowadays one of the most contemporary ideas in urbanism and what you expect from a city, all those ideas that got popular later about cities are for people and not having a car-centric city. That's a lot of Jane Jacobs. So I was, again, culturally so excited about all that world that I was being introduced to. And also on the top left, this is a photo of São Paulo's Bike Association, this group. And a lot of those people would devote a lot of time towards bike activism. And that was something that in a matter of 5 years, I saw the efforts of the people that were so close to me and that I was taking part also to have real impact in the city. So those are people who would have critical mass encounters and bike groups often, and also organized protests. And I was in college at that time, so I was really excited to bring what I could do to that group. So I was designing flyers. And to be very honest, that started just for fun, because riding bikes is pretty fun. But I had no idea that I would start, become more active in this group or get introduced to all this local cultural references, and also get introduced to Jane Jacobs' ideas. It just, something that started so little grew so much. And at the end of it all, I saw this group, the efforts of this group, being in the center of a discussion with our mayor at the time, who was Fernando Haddad, to build the first 500 kilometers of cycling paths. So I was just really amazed that there was impact in what I did, and not really me, but the group I belonged in. There was impact in civil action. So those 3 moments really shaped myself, and therefore shaped how my daily practice. And what I learned from these 3 moments is that what matters the most in design is not design itself. So in the first moment, finding out that design existed, what really impacted me now looking back is that I saw my mom seek for an authentic life and seek for a route for her life that was so different from my family history. And I am sure that was not the easiest route to go, but she was, despite of all that, seeking an authentic life and making those choices. And I saw her seek her independence through design. And I think that in some ways I did the same. And that served as an example for me. Living by a philosophy in the second moment, something that was just, I just wanted to be cool, I just wanted to be cool as my brother was, and have listened to that music that sounded cool. But what we don't realize that this cool has a reason behind it. And every visual manifestation has a reason why it is like that. So all this cliche, form follows function, that's a little about that, And also, if we, as designers, we want to optimize messages. So their culture has to look attractive. A message that we want people to hear, it has to be attractive. Otherwise, no one will listen. And the third moment, minding my own impact. I had many times I had the impression that I am just one person and I cannot impact bigger things than me, than my life. And to a certain extent, it's true. I don't think design will save the world at all. But what we do in our daily life, something that started as I just wanted to ride bikes, that grew a lot. And, you have an impact, and your practice has an impact. So it's really important for you to think that. And that's why my favorite projects are the ones that started a conversation with people and make, or have have something, a message that I find important. So these are 2 posters I designed for the Brazilian Graphic Design Biennial, I think last year. Basically what happened here is the Brazilian Graphic Design Biennial asked for 30 designers to design 2 posters in that very long format. And they didn't give us, they said, like, just do whatever you want. So I was like, well, I'm going to talk about something that I think that people should pay attention. And I think that one of the things is the rise of fascism or fascist expressions or expressions of fascism. So what it says here, because it's in Portuguese, it says, before it's authorized, before it's normalized, before it's petrified, cut it. Statues are really connected with idea of dictator fascism, and we don't need to wait for ideas to be petrified. We don't need to wait for ideas to be normalized. We can cut it before. And I mean, it's an interesting day today, but this was made for the past, but I think that, you know, this message is something that's still relevant. This one is actually a commercial project. So this is my last project at Sagmeister Walsh and Walsh. This is Zuba. This is a Arab fast food chain that came from Cairo and wanted to open in New York. And I mean, I get engaged in projects pretty easily. I really like the challenge of, you know, basically any project, but I was especially excited about this one because when I was a kid, there was an Arab fast food chain in front of my school. Roberto might know that and remember that, Habib's. And I would go there pretty often. I love that. And I knew that in 2001, Habib's had planned to open in the States. And I was excited about that. I don't know why I had such an excitement towards the company, but I was very excited about that. And they did not open in the end because of 9/11 and the Christian xenophobia in the States. So I don't know why that impacted me so much. As a kid, I was 11 years old. I was so surprised that that was happening because I guess being in Brazil, my family has been in Brazil for a long time, but we're still a minority, you know? So yes, I had that sense of empathy. But also, when that project came along, that immediately reminded something that happened in my childhood, and I was just like, wow, time has passed. This restaurant, coming from Cairo, is opening in the heart of New York. It's opening in Nolita, which is a very like affluent, trendy neighborhood in New York. And that would never happen in 2001. And that's happening now. So, and the client was also so open and so good. And I mean, the brief we worked on the whole branding, but I'm showing you the mural, just the facade. And the brief for that is just like, be an artist, do whatever you want. We just want something beautiful. And it just warmed my heart. I wanted to be as loud and as proud as I could be for them. And, you know, I think that I'm really proud of this project, and that was a great way to have a last project at that company. This other project is a project I worked on while I was in Barca. So I worked there for Greenpeace in a campaign. I'm showing you just the report, but we worked in a campaign called Greening Away the Amazon. Basically, Brazil is as big as the US. Sometimes it's just crazy to me that like I'm in New York to go all the way to Colorado. It would take more hours than I thought it would. I would take, but it's big. It's a big country as well. So for people in cities like São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, there are like big cities in Brazil. To think about the Amazon forest, that's a pretty far reality. Most people in São Paulo, most people in Rio have never been to the Amazon forest. I have never been to the Amazon forest. And the closest those people get to that is like the place is the supermarket, because over 60% of the forested areas in the Amazon forest are due cattle farming. And that meat is coming to São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro supermarkets. So this project, we wanted to target one main supermarket and other 5 to sign a compromise to stop buying meat from the forested areas. And I was really excited to work on this project. Either way, we worked on a video, we worked as a designer. There were exciting challenges there. But also, what was most exciting about this project is that in the end of the project, our targeted supermarket did agree with stop buying meat from the forested areas until a certain year. And I think after some months, all the supermarkets in São Paulo agreed to that to a certain year. So I didn't think, I mean, I was excited to work on the visuals, you know, I would be excited anyway, but it got me way more excited that I was using my skills to do something that I believed in. And, you know, we're here waiting on the election results. And 4 years ago, I was it 4? Yeah, kind of, a little less. But so I was a little feeling bad about Brazilian elections. And we got Bolsonaro elected. And I think it was a Sunday, and I was just feeling down, and I started doing this visual exploration for absolute no reason. And I posted whatever, a few likes, whatever, it's not important. But that was something that I did to express myself, that I didn't mean to, you know, influence anything. But some months after, that exploration is what made people contact me and say, hey, like, we have some protests going on, like, do you want to just design a poster for this protest? And there are some issues related to Bolsonaro. And I was happy that I could use something that I was doing for my own feelings and for my own design self-therapy to something that, you know, could be useful to other people. So this is, I just gave you an overview and just like some screenshots of some projects. I chose, I think 4 projects to really show you, and maybe you get questions out of it. But the first one I want to show you is a project I made for my mom. So my mom found out about design, and some years ago she started producing furniture, and she asked me to design a for her. And, you know, maybe you have family that ask you for work, and I do not like that, but they are family, so you got to do something sometimes. So what I told her is, I will do it, but I will do whatever I want, and you cannot give me any feedback. So we moved forward with that, and I worked on the art direction for the photos for the furniture. And all this furniture was based on her own references, her, you know, her history. Like, this chair is called Madeleine because based on the, you know, baked Madeleine. So the shape resembles that. And everything felt, I was already living in New York, and to me, looking at that, it did feel very Brazilian to me. But, you know, when you are in Brazil, you don't really think, is this Brazilian? Does this look Brazilian? You know, but if I could see there were Brazilian references there, and they were not actually, you know, maybe not completely thought out for that. So all the art direction is a mix of references, like a mix of her nostalgia, a mix of something that's stereotypically Brazil, and something that might be also referencing to her Japanese heritage. So here are some few photos, and I'm gonna show you also the backstage of that, because I was in New York and those photos were produced in Brazil, and I worked also in the catalog. So, you know, that's fine. I can design and be long distance, but for photos, that's trickier. So what I did for the photos was to work in a very realistic mock-up and work with Tomás Artusi, who's a very talented photographer, for the final photo. And I was really surprised with the results because he did such a great job and his lighting is just perfect. But basically worked on these mocks, and the photo shoot was done long distance. So I would, get WhatsApp photos of the photos and see if they were resembling the mocks. And, he did also such a great work. And another, I'm going to show you other projects that now were made at YouTube. So the first one I want to show is Un Million. So basically, Un Million is our playlist for Latin hits. And when you think about Latin as a genre, that kind of sounds off to me because there, I'm thinking about a location or a few locations, and I cannot think of a specific sound that's so broad. How do you reduce all that to a single visual cue? So what I was thinking here was about the lack of homogeneity that Latin countries usually have. So, and that's, I would say that's our strength. Like whenever we try to say what is intrinsically Brazilian or what's intrinsically Latin, that is such a hard question, and I never heard an answer that felt right. So when thinking about that, I was like, it's this diversity. It is exactly the lack of definition, is the lack of homogeneity that makes us so interesting. So let's celebrate that. So gradients represent this, and also gradients are mathematically gradients are slopes. So an Un Million means a million. So to feel a million, to feel like a million, and this thing of gradients being slopes made me think that that's a perfect visual translation of this rising feeling. And so we have this playlist. They have different artists every week, and for us to work with different photos and different genres and different, like when you think about the 30s, like Latin music outside of Latin countries was seen as like ballroom music, like rhythms for people to dance. But like you see, like there was like a lot of artists that made Latin music really expand. Like you think of Shakira, you think of like, but you also think of Despacito, and it was like such a boom, and streaming services boosted those artists to a mainstream level. So to be able to represent all them, and more less of one visual cue, but just like a feeling. Also, I wanted to represent them in this like lack of homogeneity, loud and proud attitude. And also it was really important for me to show artists as they are, their photos as they are. So no cutting artist imagery and just showing them in a flat background, because a lot of times, first, the photographer did work there, and I want to show the photo as those artists want to be represented, and as the photographer wanted them to be represented as well. But also, in so many cases, the background changes entirely how that photo should be perceived. In many cases, that means just making cultural references invisible, and I want to show the culture. So this is Un Million. The other playlist I'm going to show you is Conditions Underground, and that's our playlist for indie music, independent artists. And that's another thing that when you think about that, independent artists, that's not a specific genre per se. Like you could be a rock artist, you could be even pop, but you could still be independent. That just means you didn't sign with a label. So my idea here to make that to be represented was to just use a very simple visual cue, which is a square, an angle square, and to represent as a metaphor that those artists are doing things their way and they're keeping their authenticity by not signing with a giant label. And then here, there is a cutout, so the artist is in a flat background, but we're still managing to show the artist's aesthetic by showing the photo in the background. And everything, like here, we're using a very brutalist aesthetic, super simple, exactly to distance the visuals from a corporate feeling. So here you see how this playlist can change weekly with different artists, with different aesthetics, and represent that world regardless. Okay, so I tried to keep this super short so we're able to chat, and I'm happy to just answer your questions and just talk about the work or anything else, get feedback.
Well, at least for me, I just want to say that this is probably one of the brown bags that Roberto has done that I've actually been pretty inspired by all this. You did a really good job.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, no. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, looking at the work on the Zuba restaurant, I think it was called. So this is just like a small little thing, but something you might be interested in. One of my best friends introduced me to this anime called JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and it looks a lot like this art style. And if you're interested, I recommend looking into it. It might be something you might like.
Yeah, I'll
like
definitely
art style wise.
Yeah, thank you for telling me that. I'll definitely look into it. That name sounds familiar, but I have never watched it.
Great, thank you, Colin. I have a question. So you moved from Brazil directly to New York, and you jumping in one of the most famous graphic design studios in New York. That is Sagmeister Walsh and Walsh. So I'd like you to just talk a little bit about how was that feeling? How you was received, and how the difference that you noticed when you jump from a huge corporation, because probably all the process is completely different in the way that you manage process, the way that all the hierarchy. So one thing is you're working in a small studio, and then you can go and talk directly with the owner of the studio, or talk directly with the client, like you said that the client was super lovely and all those things. So you on the job. So whether you're going to a corporate like Google, so how do things change in your process to design?
Yeah, first, when I first moved to New York, I think, well, first, yeah, those two environments, like the studio and tech company, they're super different. But when I moved from Brazil to New York 4 years ago, I was going from my small studio to someone else's small studio. So, I mean, small, I mean, in size, how many people work there. And I was very surprised that the experiences were somehow similar, in the sense that, the size of the company was similar, so that was not much different. What was the main difference for me is that, and I think that a lot of people relate to that, is that relate to working for someone else, is that I went from having my studio and giving people's creative direction or art direction, or just designing it myself, to working for someone else, designing at someone else's company. And especially working for someone who's so well known, like Jessica and Stefan, you would think that you would have to probably do something that, something that what would they do, right? And whenever I'm working for someone else, I want to do something that relates to the client's client, to my creative director, and to myself. I'm part of the equation as well. And I found it in that change that my best work comes from I do whatever I think is best. And whenever anyone does something thinking about what another person would do, they do a slightly worse version of what they would do. So that was the main difference for me. And then moving from Sagmeister and Walsh and Walsh to Google, I think that first the main difference was, my peers are not all designers anymore. And I mean, in my life, most of my friends are graphic designers, and I always worked with graphic designers because I was always in studio and agency environments. So I really loved actually talking to people who are not designers, because sometimes we're the worst, but also it is really enriching to the work to get feedback from people with different skill sets, and in a diverse environment in all senses. That's really good. I think that also another main difference is when you're in a studio, when you're in an agency, you do the work and you put that in the world, and you get very little chance to correct anything that might have been a mistake. When you work in-house, you get the chance to make the product better every day. And whenever you see something that you did that was not good, that didn't get the impact you wanted, the users didn't like it, you get actual data to show that did not happen. And you get to, get your chance to interpret that data and see what can you do to make, with design, to make that better. So I think that's the main difference for me, and that's something I very much wanted, to have like real world long-term impact on one product. But also when it comes to like the size and structure and hierarchies, I didn't find much different. In the end, people are just people, and all the relationships, everything that comes with dealing with people, that is like everywhere.
Yeah. So taking a segue on what you said about data, I'd like to do another question that is, we are in a world right now that we are being managed by data. So how in the process of design, or in your process of design, you can manage this idea of having access to all those data, or taking risks and working intuitively with the work that you're doing? Because sometimes where I was talking with John Billenberg, our first guest, and I did a kind of similar question for him, like how important is for a graphic designer or artist to take risks? So how we can innovate if you're just based on data, for example. I would like to listen to you a little bit about this.
That's a great question. I think that's a real challenge, because before I worked at Google, I thought that, well, data is there, so you just look at it, and there to interpret data. So like whenever you get a number, there are so many things that could have influenced that number. And first, there's the challenge of thinking of all that things. Like, it's not only about, in my case, my artwork there, my little thumbnail, but all the other things that are around it. Like, was this, there's so many things. So there's that part that's already a challenge. But I also think that through data, you can read what people are doing. But when you think about the most innovative products, or the most innovative services, they didn't come from data. Maybe they had some root in that, but it's always a mix between intuition and method. So like, if you want to do something, that's really, really cool and innovative, data will not provide you, or from my experience, I don't think data will provide you with those ideas. Sometimes people don't know what they want until they see it. So there is a leap of faith that you have to take, and being in a tech company, that means a leap of faith that a lot of people have to take. And I think that that's the challenge there, to, you know, try to get people to be close to your idea and also believe in that. And maybe it won't work at first. There are so many other factors. Maybe something that will work 5 years from now, like, will not work now, you know. So
Yeah, another question that I would like to ask you, you change your job in the middle of this pandemic, right? So kind of. Um, how was, because this is something that we are living right now. So for example, we having this conversation, my classes are going online. We talked that when you started, when I started also as a designer, because I used to play with my students that I'm a dinosaur. Uh, the internet was horrible. So the situation that we are living now, we couldn't imagine that we can work and talk with people like we are doing. This is more like a Jetsons cartoon than anything that you already live at the time. So how was the process that people interview you, or and also taking a segue on this one more time, how people found you from in São Paulo and say, this girl should come to and work here with me. And so what I'm trying to say, how important was internet and all the things that we're living nowadays in your career?
that was vital. That was probably like, I would never be in New York. I'm sorry, my dog is
No
crying.
problem.
I would never be in New York. I would, you know, like, internet to a certain extent, well, it democratized a lot of things to a certain extent. Of course, there is also a factor that some people don't have access to internet, but to a certain extent, it does make things really, it did make my world and the possibilities bigger. So I don't think I would be in New York without it. If you go way back, whenever I was a teenager, and all those 3 moments, I wouldn't even know about so many different references and so many different interesting things that I saw online without it. Especially right now, like, I joined Google in January, and then I think that we started working from home in March. So most of my time at Google has been online. And to be honest, like, most of my team is in San Francisco anyway. So that, the internet is already necessary.
You want to be part of this? Come, bring him to us.
To be part of it. Anyway, but when you think about the profession itself, not only internet but digital media changed it so much. Now making things is so much easier than in the beginning of the profession, in the very beginnings. So making is interesting, and visual innovation per se is like, it's something that interests me. But whenever we have so many different ways, and visual culture is so democratized, not only like actual like opening a software like Illustrator, but people can design outside of design. Like, as designers, we bring more to it. We bring a way of thinking to it. So I think that internet and digital media has had my internet. I'm gonna stop sharing. So
Okay, no problem. Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah, we have some like internet issues, but everything is okay. I will ask if someone want to do also another question. We still have time. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so before this conversation, we were looking at some lecture presentations and we looked at some of your fashion illustrations. And I was wondering if you had ever worked in that kind of industry and your experience with that, because I really liked those illustrations.
sorry, what illustrations?
Your
They're like
illustrations.
fashion illustrations.
Sorry, you cut it just again. Sorry.
Fashion.
Oh,
And like
yeah,
clothing design.
Yeah, so like I think when I was a kid, like that was I was definitely thinking about it, but I never really worked with fashion. I definitely have an interest in fashion when it comes to one more visual manifestation of like how you dress says so much, you know, about you and about the culture and the times. But I never worked with fashion.
Okay, just kind of like another form of expression.
Yeah.
So another thing is you said that you never did the book cover. So you have plans to do the book cover?
Well, right now I'm just on playlist covers. So that never happened, and you know, in the end, I never really went after it. But I would be really happy to do that, maybe in the future.
Yeah. Some other question, people?
I have one more real quick one. Speaking of book covers and stuff, so like as a graphic designer, well, let's see how do I put this. Like, what do you think is one of the best ways to do a wide range of work? Like let's say you really love doing book covers, but at the same time, it's like you're also getting into things and fields like branding and graphic design for other sort of uh, companies and functions, or maybe even advertisements. Like, what do you think is a good way to do multiple fields at once? Or do you recommend doing one at a time, or maybe just jumping in and doing what feels right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people think about this dilemma of should I specialize or should I be a generalist. But I think that when I was in college, that was something that most people like. I grew up like that. Like people would say specialize because that will secure you a job. And I think that especially here in the US, um, there are chances for for not to need to specialize, and I found it really enriching to see people that wouldn't define themselves as a brand designer, or maybe not define themselves as an illustrator or editorial designer, but would just use their way of thinking to any project. Like I think that comes down a lot to how you do stuff. So like when I think of method, for example, I was never able to think, oh, this is how I do stuff, this is my method, because it often has to change depending on what problem are you trying to solve, and timelines and relationships. So I think that doing a large range of things is not a problem at all, and you can always bring the way that you think to any kind of solution, and just think about maybe it's about a different media and think about that. But I think the best way to do that is to just explore a lot and just always try to be curious about different things, especially outside of design. So thank you. Oh, that's cool. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Colin. One thing that you talk about is the impact of design that you learn during biking and your process to discover that actually what we do, we can impact people's life. And I think this is a subject that I really love because this is part of my research also. Um, just like a quick note, Fort Collins is known by being a biking city, so we have a lot of trails for bike all over the city. People use bike a lot, even during the winter time, and uh, and this definitely changed the way that people leave the city. Um, and one thing that I would like to ask you is, for these people, they're starting to design now and starting to create some of the things. How do you believe? How can you encourage them to pursue some of the ideas they have? Like, for example, you said about the bike and how you put yourself in this conversation and how you add to the conversation with your design until you got to the former mayor in the city that you live. So how can we, and we see this during this process of the election, like designers like Jessica Hirsch asking people to create, how you can see our position as communicators in these dialogues.
Yeah. So I think that there are some projects that are obviously political. Like if you're making, a poster for to encourage people to vote, that's, you know, the intention there is obvious. But I think that the main thing is to think that every action is political, whether we want it or not. So there are many, many times that I think that we don't realize that we are impacting a larger culture. So for example, let's take Al Mignon, for example. Um, I'm Latina, so I felt I could have a say in this, and I had strong opinions about this. But if I just like took a super stereotypical idea of Latin countries and put on that playlist, like how many users are gonna see it, and like, is this, something that we want to people associate with that? Because that's creating a subconscious ideas in people's brains that you're not saying like something super, direct, but you're building ideas that might lead to other ideas, and it's evolving into more destructive behavior. So um, you gotta think of that, like what projects do you want? Like it's not always that we can do it, but um, what projects are we, like what messages are we optimizing, in how we are doing this? So I don't know, like even having I talked about this with a friend. There's this maybe to put an artist that, for example, it is trans in the cover of a playlist. This is super mainstream, and this is like pop culture, to get people to see that and feel fine with that, and build ideas that it's okay, that's doing a lot, and that's not exactly like a obvious political project per se. So we, I think that we should always think that every action is political. So everything that you do in a project, like think about what is this what is this saying, like how is this contributing to the ideas that you believe in?
What kind of message you want to pass that actually match with your ideas and values and everything that you put in that project, right?
Exactly.
Cool. So we have time for one more question, people. Someone has questions?
I have a question.
Of course, Parker, thank you.
Okay, so the design build is pretty competitive, and I was wondering if you could go more in depth of how you, I guess, like landed a job at Google and like what the application process looked like, and like what like I can do to make myself like stand out from other designers who are pretty competitive.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's very competitive, and I think that the way to stand out is always different for the company that you're applying. So for example, when you're thinking about small studio environments, you know, they're seeking for something, or like a large company is probably seeking for something else. The process at Google, Parker, sorry, do you want to talk about specifically Google or something else, or just more general?
I guess more general.
I see. Yeah, so I think that I don't know if you already have an area of design that you want to work at, but you know, you don't have to choose by now. I think that this is the time that you should try different things, and for a long time try different things. But when I think that most people believe that most every time I got this question, I think that a lot of people expect one single answer, and it of course depends on the kind of company that you're applying to. So for example, if you're applying for a branding studio, it would be interesting to see branding in your portfolio, of course, you know. So like, I think that it's really important you have your portfolio, you have your personal projects or corporate projects, but trying to change your portfolio to each company and to cater to that company, so what you want them to see is more visible, is really good. And the work itself, I think this is very broad because we're talking about, you know, so many different situations here, but I would take out of your portfolio anything that you, because I would do that a lot, that I would just add stuff in my portfolio because I was like, I don't really love that project, but I want people to know that I'm capable of doing this and that and that. Like, if you don't think it's good, do not add it, because when people see something that's bad, their brains just remember what's bad, and you just send whatever you think that represents you. And there's a really high chance that people will look at it and say, I can see what like kind of softwares you use here. I can see what kind of things you can do. And I think that if most likely they will see what was your thinking there, and what was like, is the main concept visible? Is it, you know, is it all the goals of the project, are they explained? And whenever I used to work at other companies and I would see people's portfolios, I know this will sound very basic, but I feel I want to say it because I saw it so many times. Many times, an email would come with, you know, no message. And then if you're in a process that there are like over 500 people competing for one spot, if I receive an email that does not have anything written to me, you know, I will see the email that someone wrote something. So there are very small things that are very basic, maybe too basic to even talk now, but I saw it so many times that I felt that I had to say it. Or you're sending a PDF and there's no, I don't have access to the PDF. If the person is super busy, they're not gonna reach out to you, be like, hey, like you forgot, you know? So like double checking this, making sure that your portfolio represents you and like you're really proud of everything that's there. And you know, if other people worked on those things, like credit everyone, so whoever is hiring you know exactly what was your role and what to expect from you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, check typos, check grammar, check details, know how to write. Designers need to know how to write well and explain and defend our ideas, because more than ever, everything's getting more digital. So you're sending things for people and not always you have time to sit in front of the person and explain. So you have to know how to write. This also is important to think about.
One last thing. A lot of people are really busy and don't respond on emails. And if someone didn't respond to your email, just keep sending them again, you know, and maybe at some point like they miss it and just didn't forgot to respond. So I think that's one little thing that most people would be like, oh, they didn't answer me, that's because my portfolio is horrible. Probably not. Probably they just didn't, they were busy.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I will stop the recording now. I ask you to stay a little bit more, and I say for the students, just go away and say thank you for all the students that come. And I see you next class or next week. And bye-bye. And thank you so much, Gabriela, one more time. It was
Thank you
super
so much.
amazing.
Thank you.